I created this Trinity Bible study for one of my closest Jehovah Witness friends. As a fundamental Baptist myself, my Jehovah Witness friends kept telling me that we as Baptists got most of our Trinity verses out of the New Testament, and that the Old Testament doesn't teach Trinity at all. So with that in mind, let's find out if the Bible teaches Trinity by comparing both the Old and the New Testament Bible scriptures.
Okay, the Father is the one who chooses us to be saved or not. Now this goes back to the predestination of us being chosen before we were even born, and of God knowing every single thing about us from the time we were born to the time we die, and knowing who He chooses or not. And the Father is the one that does this. He's the one that does this choosing. Ephraim 1, 4 through 5. According as He hath chosen us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before Him in love, having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to Himself, according to the good pleasure of His will. Wow, this is a loaded verse here. You can't get any clearer than that. It even uses the word predestinated. So, having predestinated us, I mean, He already knew. And I've said many times, we're like on a videotape, and He and only He alone knows that videotape, but He does know from thousands of years ago who we were, what we look like, what our name would be, first name, last name, everything about us. And at that same time, He picked us out. He hath chosen us in Him before the foundation of the world. Before the world was even created, He knew all about us. Wow, what a powerful God. And keep in mind, this is the Father that is the one that's that chooses us, not anybody else. 2 Thessalonians 2:13. But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. So, again, from the beginning. I mean, that goes way back to the beginning of time, which God, there is no time. So before the eons of time, before anything, go back to the beginning of the beginning, God, from the beginning, chose you. Very, very powerful to me. Then we have the Son is the one who chooses us to be saved or not. John 15:19. If ye were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Now, right away I have a problem with this if Jesus is a separate individual, because if God had already chosen you and me, okay, to be saved before the world was even begun. And we're not talking about, remember, God doesn't change, so we're talking about the fact that every single individual that was ever born on this planet, all the way up until the last individual, okay, which may not even be born yet, they were already, the particular individual, whether it's 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100, those 1 out of 100 that were already chosen and picked out. He already knew it. Okay, Jesus comes along and says, I have chosen you. So we have to either believe that, again, base it on the logic Jesus is a separate created individual of the Father, not the Father, but a separate individual. Then we have a problem of God already picking out and choosing who He wants to choose. And then we have Jesus comes along and says, I'm going to choose you. So we have two groups of people here. One group that the Father chooses, and He's already chosen before the world began. And then you've got another group of people that Jesus chooses. Okay? Well, what if the Father didn't choose that one that Jesus chose? Since the Father already chose, then Jesus has to be choosing other people, because if He's choosing the same people that Father chose, there would be no point, because the Father already chose them. But He is independently choosing, and that's why He says, I have chosen you. So you've got two groups of people. That doesn't make sense to me. If the same people that God chose, if Jesus is in fact God, then they would have automatically been the same people when Jesus chose them, because the Father and Jesus are the same. So when he says, I have chosen you, he's basically saying, I, as God, am substantiating what I said back in Ephesians and back in 2 Thessalonians, that I have chosen you. And more detail, I chose you before the world even began. So stating it just like God had already stated it. If not, and he is not God, then you've got a problem with saying that you've got two groups of people that were chosen. And God obviously had his reasons for choosing us before we were even born. So he already did all the choosing and already knew who he wanted and not, and now Jesus is bringing in a second group of people that he's choosing. And if the Father didn't choose these people, then why would the Son choose them? So it's very confusing to me to believe in non-Trinity in that particular scenario of understanding.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to watch the next video explaining the examples of the Old and New Testament Trinity verses.